can you tell me why that is flashing and not solid? What do you think it means? It, it is connected, otherwise it would be gray. If different? Different? Sample rate? It could be, or this is not the case because Dante is working at 48 kilohertz at the moment, but different? Different? Clock domain. You might think, oh, it's the same, right? They are related, but it's not the same. So once forever. I have my typical example. What is the word clock? Baseband, classical things, AS3, MADI, blah, blah, blah. The word clock is the information which tells you constantly how long is a second. Oh, come on, Luke, everybody knows how long is a second. Yes, but in Monday morning, the second is much faster than the Friday night. And I mean that from the technological point of view, electronics cannot guarantee you that how long is a second is true. You have a slightly little difference. But if you chop the second in 48,000 slices, and every slice you have to pass me a sample, well, we need to be very, very in agreement how long is a second, because it's not important to know how long is a second. It's how long is a 1/48,000th of a second. Because that is giving you the pace to pass me the sample. So when I used to travel for Optocore in China back 20 years ago, I struggled to let the Chinese people to understand why the Optocore was a synchronous system and why it was different from anything else. So I invented this example, and especially, the Chinese people, after 20 minutes, they start to sleep. So you have in front of you 30 engineers, and half of them are sleeping after 20 minutes. So you start to have some problems. So I invented this method. So I was asking everybody to jump off from the several chairs and whatever, put them all in a circle, and say, get a pen on your left hand. Get ready to receive the pen from your mate from the other side. The pen is the sample, right? So you are a synchronous guy. So you have to exchange the bytes and the samples in a synchronous way. So start. Pens were falling over, people were not ready, and say, okay, why is not working? Because you don't have a master clock. So now I'm going to give you the pace. I need a master clock. So every time I clap my hand, you take one sample from the guy before and you give the sample. Tick, tock, tick, tock, 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 tock. And then on purpose, I was doing tock, 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 and it worked. So they were synchronous, even if I was speeding or pacing down. That's exactly what is happening with few fluctuations in a real environment. How long is a second is not always true. So if I have an idea of how long is a second, and you have a different idea of how long is a second, if you try to exchange synchronous samples, you have glitches, pops, clicks, blah, blah, blah. That's why, because we don't have the same pace when we have to exchange, thing. So the word clock is just telling you how long is a second, nothing else. So surprise, surprise, I'm running at 48 kilohertz, you are running at 96 kilohertz, but we could be synchronous. Huh? Yes, if we share the same idea of how long is a second, we are synchronous. The problem is that I'm chopping the seconds in 48,000 slices. You are chopping that in 96,000 slices. But the how long is a second is the same information. So you can be synchronous even if you're running different sample rates. Sample rates is related to the clock, but it's not the same thing. The sample rate is in how many different slots you divide 1 second. And therefore, how many samples of audio you provide for 1 second. But the synchronism, the timing, the how long is a second is the information derived by the clock. That is getting even more complicated when you get into the audio over IP, which is not the scope of today's, but how long is a second is not any longer enough when you have to deal with Dante, Ravenna, SoundGrid, and AVB and whatever. You need to add more information, And that's the reason why we need the PTP, the precise time protocol, which is adding another important information. Not just how long is a second, but what time is now. Because you cannot have a different idea of what time is now by 1 microsecond or 42 microseconds, because that would mean that you put the sample in the wrong place if you don't agree exactly the same timing. That's why it's so important to have a superb PTP distributed all over the network.